I might remember to people, I'm remembering right now the very first time I met you. And I asked you what it was you were wanting in your life right now. And you told me love. Or it could come up as a new cycle. So we could go through a cycle and get to power, freedom, whatever, and then the person could break down and cry, just with having surfaced that desire for power and freedom. And we could just spend a lot of time with that emotion, with those tears, and then I could say, check back in. What is it that you're wanting around all of this now? How does it feel right now? So it could be a second loop based on that same initial loop. Either or both. Or it could be, in advanced stages of treatment, now, what is it that you're wanting in your life? I worked with a client yesterday who is in a new relationship, and this person has a history of complex, pretty adverse condition experiences, complex trauma. When she's in the initial stages of relationship and she's getting lots of space, she feels really drawn and attracted, and that there's a good attunement. Then when her girlfriend comes in with any kind of demand, judgment, slight misattunement, then she's trapped, it's not going to work, she needs to get out. So I reminded her of, first of all, this deep desire that she has for relationship, and second of all, how profound it felt initially when there's enough space and freedom. So you can use this work of the interaction cycle through all phases of treatment, but it's really important in an initial phase of treatment. So that's one theoretical perspective. Another theoretical perspective is in terms of attunement and safety and bonding. I think you can feel as I make these illustrations that I'm coming from my own self-inquiry. I'm coming from also a deep resonance through my whole being, through my emotions, through my body. And that level of attunement that comes when we inquire from the depth of our being into the depth of another's being, that's really what's possible with attunement. If we're working with attunement that sensitively and with enough self-awareness, then we don't have to get hung up in solidifying attachment style, nor do we have to get hung up in pathologizing any kind of trauma or mental illness. Once we reach a level of attunement and safety, then we're at the root of potential transformation. We're at the root of when we can feel a dissociative state or a reactive state or intense defensive structures and essentially cajole them into transforming. So this is an important part of my work, body-mind psychotherapy, and my embodiment work altogether, is that there is no solid emotional illness, trauma, or characterological disorder. Now, I'm not saying that I've never met a character disorder that I couldn't treat, nor complex trauma, nor serious mental illness. It's very important to me to not make those claims. I'm hearing a lot of people making claims about their approach to therapy. And some of those people, I know for a fact that it's not true. I think it's so damaging to everyone, to the person making the claims, to the clients, students, and to the work itself. So I'm going to restate that, and I hope it's clear. On the one hand, if you attune deeply enough, and I'm making this gesture with the attunement because later on we'll work with a technique I call circular attunement. If you work with your attunement deeply enough, attuning to yourself in the moment, attuning to your client or your student in the moment, then it's possible to get underneath the most gnarly patterns, the most difficult emotions and trauma and mental illness. Possible. I'm not saying that we're always able to do it. But staying with the potential of possibility is what allows us to help someone that's never gotten help before, which is an extraordinary thing. And maybe you've experienced that, and maybe you haven't. But it's what makes this work so nourishing. So again, I'm just giving you a little bit of theoretical background. We've looked at phases of treatment. Now looking at attunement, I briefly mentioned attachment, trauma treatment, characterological disorders. Another theoretical aspect that we could look at here is relationality in therapy. So there's discussion of the third in psychoanalysis. There's the discussion of one person, one and a half person, two people therapy. There's the issue of self-disclosure. And there's a way when you're really doing the interaction cycle that you're feeling deeply enough into yourself that there's a quality of authenticity that comes. Whether you disclose anything or not, there's a sense that the other person has, this is a real person that's here with me. This person is not hiding behind a therapeutic veneer, a therapeutic facade. Just take a moment and reflect on yourself and notice when you're trying to be somebody in your therapeutic exchanges, when you're trying to be a good therapist, a good teacher, a good coach. when you're trying to appear knowledgeable or appear to be an expert in some particular thing. And when you are really coming from your core self, your core being, the depths of your heart, putting everything you have on the line for this particular interaction. One of my most difficult clients of my life, I had cancer slightly after this client, and I thought, I bet there was some contribution there. She was an amazing human being, very bright, very creative, very fierce and intense. Terrible, terrible trauma. Cigarette burns from day one. Tons of sexual abuse. Raised by a teenage single mother. And she fought me, just fought me for, I think it was a year and a half, 2 years. I had to say I loved her. I needed to hold her like a baby. I think those were the bottom lines, those two. And I was not willing to do either for quite a while. Finally, she broke me down. And I did both of those things. And I think we did them in a way that was genuinely therapeutic, even though I basically gave in. And maybe I'll come back to this later when you understand me better and how I work better, so that I can break it down, how I made those two very difficult steps in therapy, how I tried to make them therapeutic, even though they were completely counterindicated for a number of reasons. But the point now being that she later wrote me. She made huge steps. Let's give this person a name so that I can remember to talk about her. Let's call her Alta. And we'll use her as a thread. She wrote me years after we had discontinued therapy. And she told me, this is going to make me cry. Maybe not. Maybe I can do it. She told me that of all the therapists, she had been in therapy for 25 years at the point she came in. She said, of all the therapists I worked with, you had more skin in the game. And I think that is the most meaningful thing anybody's ever said to me in terms of my work. It really meant a lot. And it was somewhat literal because I was holding her. But also, she meant it figuratively. And so to me, that means I had more heart in the game. And I had more of the depth of my being in the game. So really, that's the bottom line in terms of attunement and relationality. How do we show up fully and at the same time take care of ourselves, protect ourselves, nourish ourselves, don't overextend ourselves? And in this case, that was a really fine line I had to walk to do that. But and maybe it was so stressful that it contributed to my cancer. But at the same time, I think it was overall very powerful for both of us. So I hope that gives you enough theoretical content to kind of wrap your mind around this idea of the interaction cycle and what we're trying to do with surfacing our desires. Okay, thank you.